In this episode of Music Recollections, guest Melisa shares stories from her first concert, Rick Springfield in Atlanta at the Civic Center, how she got tickets through a promoter connection, and what it was like being close to the stage. She recounts seeing Rick Springfield multiple times, including a front row show where Corey Hart opened and she briefly touched Springfield and got splashed by his sweat. Melisa discusses how her tastes evolved from top 40 and bands like The Cure into more diverse listening, now driven by streaming and playlists with artists like Taylor Swift and synthpop. She describes a scary Violent Femmes mosh pit experience in Athens, highlights stadium shows she attended pre-COVID, and explains how songs can strongly trigger emotions and memories. Let's get started with another episode of Music Recollections with your co-hosts, Brian and James.
Welcome to another episode of Music Recollections. I'm really happy that we have a wonderful guest with us today, Melisa. Melisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name's Melisa. I live in Seattle, Washington. Go Hawks. I'm originally from Georgia. Went to University of Georgia back in the dark ages. So go Dogs also. That's about it.
All right, well, thank you. And I think I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Brian.
Well, yes, Melissa, great to have you on. And yeah, go Seahawks. Congratulations. And of course, go Dogs, fellow Bulldog with our co-host. Can you tell us about the first concert you attended?
First concert I went to was Rick Springfield. Pretty sure it was his second album tour. Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet. Not 100% on that, but pretty sure. Yeah, that was the first concert that I remember going to.
What grade were you in? And do you remember what was Jesse's Girl the biggest hit at the time?
No, it was Don't Talk to Strangers. So it was,
Okay, that was a good song.
yeah.
Do you remember how you got the tickets and all of that? Because back in the day, I remember we were talking about that camping out or waiting in line.
I actually went down to try to get tickets and didn't realize that I had to wait in line. Somebody from my grandmother's church actually drove me down to get tickets, and everybody was gone when we got down there. My mother, from whom I was kind of estranged at the time, worked for an answering service for their promoter, and she was able to get 4 tickets. So I think it was actually a promotional thing from Z93. So like the tickets were $2.93. So they went pretty fast, but yeah, she took us.
That's pretty amazing. Was this at the Omni or where was it, in Atlanta?
I think it was at the Civic Center in Atlanta.
Oh wow, that's a super cool memory. Well, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host James.
Yeah, that's a really cool memory of your first concert. Was there anyone that opened for them or?
I don't remember. Possibly there was somebody that opened for them, but it was so long ago. I mean, I wasn't old enough to drive, so.
You were just so starry-eyed with Rick Springfield that's all you could think
I
about.
don't know what it was. There was a lot of screaming, and, heart racing, and we were on like the 4th row, so we were pretty close. Didn't get to touch him. I didn't get to touch him till later on in my life. No touching him that time.
I think there's a story there that I don't want to overlook. What about the touching part? What is this all about?
Well, I mean, I've been to an ungodly amount of Rick Springfield concerts, but I think maybe the next one I went to, I went with one of my friends and she was able to scout tickets and we got on the front row. I remember Corey Hart opened then, and it was the Human Touch tour. And since we were on the front row, I was able to actually touch his leg. I touched his thigh. And he like went like this with his hair and I got sweat splashed on me. So of course, I didn't want to wash for forever. because it was just so exciting at the time. I had like fingerless gloves as one did in that age, and I didn't wash those clothes for forever because I'd wiped my sweat off or his sweat off with the gloves. So
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. That's a great story. Um, one of my questions was, how has your musical taste changed? Are you still a Rick Springfield fan, or have you kind of opened the door to other types of music?
yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I still like to listen to a Rick Springfield song every now and then, but yeah, I can't say that he's in my top 5 list now. He definitely doesn't make my heart like skip a beat anymore at his advanced age. I think once you get on Medicare and whatnot, you don't stimulate the youngsters quite like you used to. But yeah, I think I have more diverse musical interests than I used to. Um, like I never would have thought about listening to country when I was in high school, or I was pretty much, like The Cure, things like that. Normal top 40 stuff, whatever came on Sundays on the Casey Kasem show. I remember like recording cassettes and actually 8 tracks from America's Top 40.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Brian.
No, that's amazing with Rick Springfield. He does a show on Sirius XM. It's funny, ironically, I was listening to him today doing like an 80s top 20 80 songs for 1986. Ironically, James, when we graduated from high school. So that was just
Yikes.
kind of cool to hear his voice. He seemed like a cool guy, and I liked him because he didn't take himself too seriously. So he just I know he was on a soap opera and all that stuff too, but he just seemed like he was pretty humble for now. But so you saw him 5 times. Corey Hart, I remember that song, "Sunglasses at Night." That was a pretty cool song at the time.
Yeah,
What's the
he
best
opened.
concert? I'm sorry. Yeah, do you want to talk about Corey Hart?
Oh no, he just opened when I was on the front row. So that was kind of cool.
Wow. And what is the energy like being on the front row? Because my brother and I snuck up to the 10th row for REM, I want to say, and it was unreal. It's like on the front row, what is it like compared to just sitting way in the back?
Well, at a Rick Springfield concert, it's kind of dangerous because all the girls are like pushing and everything to try to touch him. So it was kind of dangerous. I mean, I've been at more dangerous concerts, but um, yeah, I mean, when you're young and it's somebody that you're, infatuated with, it's extremely exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you get beads of sweat on you, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So talk about, you mentioned dangerous. What about the most dangerous concert you've been to and the best concert?
Oh, well, in college, I went to see the Violent Femmes, and I'd had maybe a touch too much to drink, and I kind of got stuck in the mosh pit, and I got pounced on a lot. Um, and given my dizzy state, it was just kind of scary.
Wow,
Any,
where did they play? Was this in Athens?
yeah, it was at Athens. It was a Georgia theater.
Oh, cool. Wow, that must have been amazing. Yeah, because they were really like glowing hot back then in the 80s. And yeah, I guess the 80s was the heyday.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen them more recently. It definitely wasn't the same experience.
That's cool. And before I turn it over to James, what about your best concert?
Um, my best concert was probably, I think it would have been Taylor Swift Eras Tour. I did see the movie afterwards. I had tickets, um, and we were actually on the floor, so we spent a lot on the tickets. And unfortunately, I was sick. I had strep throat, and I couldn't actually go to the concert, so I had to sell my ticket. But I feel like that would have been the best. Um, of the shows I've actually been to, probably Reputation was one of the best. But it was at the end. I had a string where I went to a whole bunch of stadium concerts, like all in a row, and it was the last one.
Well, that's awesome. Wow. Yeah, I definitely want to see the Netflix. I think it's a Netflix documentary on her last tour. That would be great. I've read that she's really good to the staff. Like she'll give them $100,000 bonuses and things, like the truck drivers and things. So, and someone I worked with, he used to live in Nashville and said she was pretty approachable. This was probably 10 years ago, but she was pretty approachable, lived in the same apartment complex. So I've always heard good things about her. So yeah, I'll turn it over to James, but super cool stories.
Yeah, so Melissa, I'm really curious to find out what's your best album that you really like. What's your favorite?
Um, I don't really listen to albums anymore because everything is streaming. Um, I mean, I remember like my first albums, like my first CDs. My first actual vinyl was, of course, Rick Springfield, Working Class Dog, which I did get signed fairly recently. Um, my first CD was The Cure, Disintegration.
I remember there were some really good songs on Disintegration. Do you remember some of those
I think like
songs on that
Fascination
album?
Street maybe was on there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it was very well, whenever I saw them in concert, it was very white, white sheets and breezy. So that's pretty much how I think of the album.
And they have that song called Push, which is a great song. And then that song End Song that's about 10 minutes. It's really cool.
I think that's on Disintegration too. I think Friday I'm in Love might be on Disintegration, but I'm not 100% sure.
I would say, y'all, that they're probably one of the most underrated bands of all time.
oh for sure. And especially yeah, throughout the years, they've just yeah been able to continue to make new, different music, and yeah, his voice is still amazing. I mean, yeah, like you said, Brian, you saw him fairly recently within the past couple of years, and it sounded just like the Robert Smith of the '80s. So that's hard to do. He looks a little older, but he still has the crazy hair and the makeup, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, he probably needs the crazy hair and makeup like the head.
For
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
they're probably almost 60, would you say? They're probably getting up there.
I don't consider 60 like getting up there
Well,
since
I know. Well, I guess we're all pushing there. But for rockers. No, that's true.
yeah, so I don't really listen to whole albums anymore with streaming. It's more whatever's on my playlist that I listen to over and over.
So what kind of songs do you find yourself listening multiple times to?
Well, Taylor Swift, but if you look at my Spotify, end of year summary, I listen to a lot of synth pop apparently. So Taylor Swift was one of my top artists. Andrew Bell was one of my top artists. Um, I really like Young Summer right now, and that's definitely synth pop. And there's a couple of songs by the Chromatics that are remakes of other songs that I really like. She has
That's pretty cool.
they have a Bruce Springsteen remake of I'm on Fire and then a Neil Young song um, that I really like. Does not sound like Neil Young.
We were talking about Cure earlier, and I'm sure a lot of these synth pop bands wouldn't be in existence if, the Cure hadn't done what they did. So in the family tree, it just seems like, they kind of opened the door to all these other bands to use, these otherworldly kind of sounds and synthesizers and stuff like that.
So it sounds like, Melissa, you were going to see Taylor, but it fell through. You were sick, unfortunately. So I'm sure you want to see her when she tours again. But what's the last concert you attended?
Um, Actually, Reputation was the last concert I probably attended. I don't think I've been to any concerts since COVID. Um, so that year I went to a bunch of stadium shows. I went to U2 and Coldplay, Bruno Mars, Macklemore. Um, so I think I saw just about everybody.
That's amazing. So this was
Rattled off.
before the pandemic. And James, you came down. We saw that was like a birthday gift. That was awesome. We saw U2 probably around the same time. I remember they played "Get Out of Your Own Way," that song. I forgot which album that was, but it was a great show. So I'm sure it was, yeah, I'm sure it was the same one. That's very cool that you attended all those big stadium tours. It seems like rock and roll now is a little bit down. Do you know of any bands that are doing those stadium tours? Any rock and roll bands? It seems like the Stones were touring maybe a year or two ago, but I'm not sure if they're back out.
Yeah, I would say maybe Foo Fighters would be the only band that I'm thinking of that still
Yeah,
does,
that'd be about it, maybe.
yeah, that are in that genre of rock
It's
anyway.
kind of sad thinking those bands that we grew up with, they're just not, unless they're doing a reunion tour, you just don't really hear of any newer rock bands out there like that.
Yeah, I think just people's musical taste have kind of shifted to more pop music in a way. Like Melissa was saying, that most people listen to music now through streaming services, and it's hard to really get into, you know, albums, and you just kind of want to listen to the most popular songs by the popular artists, and you really don't get a chance to explore music too much anymore, um, unless you hear someone, and then it kind of leaves a little trail for you to search down.
No, that's
No,
right. We were talking a little bit about country, Melissa. You mentioned it. It seems like Jason Aldean and some of these guys, Dirk Bentley, were probably Southern rock like Leonard Skinner and Molly Hatchet 25 years ago. That it's kind of more, the country is a little bit more like rock to me. What do you all think? Like some of these
yeah,
newer country.
pop definitely.
I would say pop too, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely not the old like Waylon Jennings and those guys for sure.
no, and
And
I still
George
don't
Strait.
like
So I'd like to hear more about the Bruno Mars concert, because I know he's a great dancer, and I'm sure that whole production was pretty amazing. And did he have a big crew of like backup dancers and things like that, Melissa?
Yeah, he did have a very big um entourage, I guess, on stage with him. Yeah, so there was a lot of dancing and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you like Taylor's probably like the best at that. I mean, with the costume changes and the different dancing and things like that.
Yeah, the special effects were definitely um incredible. Like at Reputation, all the synced bracelets and things like that that make it more immersive. I feel like Coldplay, when I saw them, um, it was definitely a spectacular, with all the lighting effects and screens and other things that went on. I think they had a bracelet or something that made things happen in the crowd too.
Yeah, it seems like they were the first band to do that, the LED stuff. I think Coldplay was one of the first. They were ahead of their time.
Yeah, so that definitely added something to the experience just because it made it cool. I mean, even at our advanced age.
Well, and two, I think the fans really get involved in going to a Taylor Swift concert. They'll have their friendship bracelets on, or do they dress up or anything like that as well?
Yeah, people dress up and it's different because it's a wide range, because it's like my generation with their kids. So there's, preteens up to old ladies at the Taylor Swift concert. So it's different rather than, going before it was just, a bunch of teenagers, and I guess their parents were grudgingly there, not like actually interested in being there. I guess you really have to want to go to spend that much money on a concert. I think you have to, at a stadium show, do something to make it more of a spectacle. So it's not, you're just watching this tiny little person down, 3 flights of stadium stairs. That'd be pretty boring, actually.
How has music changed your life? How would you say that music has changed your life?
I don't think it's changed my life. I think I use it in various ways or it affects me in various ways. I mean, good or bad. Um, you know, it helps you get through hard times, makes you feel better, or, you know, if you're going through a period of extreme sadness, like it helps you wallow in that for a while when you listen to other sad songs. I know I just heard Brian Ferry's Slave to Love on the radio recently, and it actually made me nauseous because I had a really bad dating experience associated with that song. And even after like 40 years, it still kind of made me sick. Um, but yeah, I still feel like the things that I felt like when I hear like older songs, like I hear Tears for Fears and I feel like angsty and, you know, teenagery. Um, you know, I hear like happy songs and it makes me feel young. There's actually a Bryn Elliott song, Time of Our Lives, that's about like having fun with your besties when you're young. And that always makes me feel young. And even though I didn't do the things she talks about in the songs, it always makes me think about my best friends from childhood. Um, you know, Tracy Chapman, when I hear Fast Car, I think of grass and wet plastic and new love.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, Tracy Chapman. When you bring this up, I'm just thinking immediately of high school, and then The Breakfast Club with Tears for Fears, which is probably one of the greatest '80s movies. I'm glad they never did a remake of The Breakfast Club. There'll never be another one of those.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah, weren't they? Wasn't Tears for Fear? Wasn't that the song of The Breakfast Club?
Simple Minds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I get those two bands confused. But it brought me back to that movie for some reason. But this has been amazing, Melissa. Just great insights on Rick Springfield, Corey Hart. You saw Coldplay. You touched on Taylor, Bruno Mars. Just seen some great shows and just a great ending, encapsulating music, how it's changed your life, and hearing these songs. So, if you want to be a guest, please follow us on Music Recollections, Soundtrack of the Fans on YouTube. We'd love to have you as a guest. So this will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So grateful for you all. Grateful for you, Melissa, and my buddy and co-host James. So James, do you have any final words?
Yeah, just thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us today and sharing all your concert and music experiences with us. And yeah, we really appreciate you being a guest today.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having me
again.
on.
Thank you.